All right, hello YouTube. As you can see from the Christmas tree behind me, it's the holidays. So, thought I would get a little episode in here and talk about something that hopefully will be happening for a lot of you out there, which is you'll be at parties and you'll be in places where you can talk to other people, your age, other ages, and just go ahead and socialize a little bit. So, today's topic is what I like to call a talk rally. And what this is about has to do with if you've watched tennis or you watch ping pong. What happens in those sports is you hit the ball over the net and then the person hits it back and it's back and forth and back and forth, and the back and forth is called a rally. And so there is such a thing when you're thinking about talking and you're thinking about having conversations that I like to think about as kind of a rally, which is hitting it back and forth. So if anybody's ever told you that you might be on the spectrum, or that you're not really clued into social cues, you may very well be the kind of person who has scenarios that go down something like this. You start talking to somebody and they'll ask you a question, or they'll mention a topic, they'll say something to you, and you will answer them with a really long answer. And in some cases, they asked you a rhetorical question, how's it going? And that the expectation among most people is that that's kind of a small talk question, and the answer is going to be fairly short. And generally speaking, the hope is that it's going to be a fairly positive answer, even if things aren't really going that well for you. Now, if it's somebody that's real close to you and they ask you how you doing, how's it going, they actually probably do want to know. But for the average person, somebody that you'd run into at a party, if they ask you how it's going, if you're not having a great day, that's really not the time to tell someone. What they're looking for is for you to say, it's going great, I'm having a great day, or whatever. And I know that sounds fake and it sounds stupid to not be completely honest, but there is a time and a place for you to be forthright about what's going on with you. And a lot of times social situations, parties, things like that are really not the right time. So the other part of it is that and I see this from time to time, and I know that it is something that the person that is involved is completely unaware of, but it's happening. And so what I want to try to make you aware of is that if someone asks you a question, or even worse, if somebody makes a statement about something that you happen to know a lot about, that is not an invitation for you to hold court about that topic. And what I mean is, they did not invite you to tell them everything you know about that topic. And there are definitely people out there who might know an awful lot about a particular thing, and if somebody happens to bring it up, then they just launch into basically a dissertation on whatever that topic is, and the person that they are talking to is sitting there, rolling their eyes, giving all the body language of, I am not comfortable right now, and I would love nothing more than to be out from under this conversation. But because I'm being polite, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to basically sit through this entire conversation. So if you've watched any of our previous videos, you know that some of the things that you can do and the things that will help you is, if you are being interested and not interesting, then you will know not to go, spend 10 minutes talking about something that you care about, because that is you being interesting. And that is not you asking questions of the other person. It has generally been the case when I have observed this, that someone who does this is not somebody who is interested at all in the other person. In fact, if you talk to people who talk to that person on a regular basis, they will tell you, that person has probably never asked me a question as long as I have known them. I meet them, I talk to them, I will say something to them, and then they will just launch into some topic, and I'll sit there and have to sit through the whole thing for a long time. This is very common. A lot of people experience this. A lot of people have people in their lives that do this. If you happen to be somebody that does this, then it's time to fix that, because this is not helping you. This is not doing anything for your social life at all. If anything, it's a turnoff. It makes people want to not talk to you. In fact, If you look around carefully at a room full of people who have been around you in social situations, you may notice, if you're really paying attention, that some people are kind of avoiding you, that they're actually sort of walking out of their way to make sure that they're not in your path when you're walking along, because while they might be happy to talk to you for 30 seconds or 2 minutes, they really don't want to get hung up talking to you for 10 minutes, especially when they're not actually doing any of the talking. You're doing all of the talking. So let's get back to the talk rally. The talk rally is a rule set for you to use that will help you avoid these kinds of situations. So how would a rally work? Well, it's about the back and forth. The back and forth. Now, think about what we just talked about. If you're spending 10 minutes talking about something that you care about, that is not a back and forth. That's like the person lobbed a little something over the net, and then you just stood up and smashed it down on the net, and they've spent the last 10 minutes looking for the ball. That's kind of what's going on when you're just going off and talking about some topic. So what we're trying to do is trying to give you something to think about as far as a way to think about conversations. And so the person asks the question, hey, how's it going? That's a little hit over the net. Your answer is, it's going pretty well. How about you? You hit it back over the net. And they go, oh, it's pretty good. Work's getting kind of busy, but we're coming up on the holidays, blah, blah, blah. Now, here's where you guys that are kind of somewhat on the spectrum are going to really kind of dig into it, because you can actually keep track of how big of a statement or how much time did that statement take. And if you can match that, then you are rocking at the talk rally. So if you say, how's it going? And they say, pretty good. How about you? Oh, I'm doing pretty good. And all you're doing is kind of matching about the more or less amount of time that they're spending talking when it's their turn. And then when it's your turn, you spend about the same amount of time, and all you're doing is you're hitting it back over the net. And what will happen naturally is, if the conversation is going to go in a direction where there is a reason for one person to spend more time than the usual back and forth, it'll start to become obvious that that's what's going on. Like, somebody might be like, well, hey, you want to sit down or something? I mean, like, you'll get some sort of invitation to talk further or to talk more in depth. But if you're in a social situation and, there are a lot of people around or anything like that, generally speaking, you're not going to get into a lot of depth. So you kind of got to keep it shallow. You got to keep it small talk. You got to keep it talking about things that are external to both of you. And we've talked about this before. This is one of the most disarming ways to communicate with people that you don't really know. And it goes for social situations, parties, things like that. Absolutely. It makes a big difference. But what I really want you to focus on is, I want you to focus on the talk rally. I want you to focus on hitting it back and forth and back and forth. So your objective when this person says something to you or asks you a question is to answer, give them some kind of answer that, is truthful, but it's not an in-depth long answer, and all you're trying to do is just hit it back over, and then give them a chance to hit it back over. And what you're trying to do is just see how long can you keep the rally going. That's really the goal. And if you focus on that, what you will find is that people are a lot more comfortable being around you in social situations. You will find that people are not trying to avoid you. And if you start to pick up on some of the body language cues that we've talked about before, and go back and look at some of the videos, there's a body language video that you can pick up on. Watch that and start noticing some of the cues. This person's body starts to turn away from you. They start putting their arms around their shoulder, kind of closing up a little bit like this, or they start kind of glancing off in the other direction. Just look down at their feet, and their feet are pointing in another direction. If you start getting a lot of these clues, that's your tip that this conversation's probably over, and best thing for you to do is to say, oh, excuse me, I need to go check on something, or, very nice to talk to you, have a good night, and you gracefully bow out. Now, while that may have not been an awesome interaction, it certainly wasn't something that the person feels compelled to go and, like, the next person they talk to and be like, oh, God, I'm so glad I got away from so-and-so because I just spent the last 15 minutes learning about, industrialization post-World War II. And, these kinds of things happen. There are people who know about that stuff, and young people in particular got through a history class and, they were fascinated by it, and now they know it all and they want to tell people. And so some random person that meets them at a party all of a sudden just got to listen to 15 minutes of somebody explaining that. And this may sound crazy to some people who, don't know people like this or haven't experienced people like this, But I suspect that if you're watching this channel, you probably know somebody like this, and maybe you're that person, and maybe you're not aware of it. So go ask. Go ask your parents, go ask your friends, go ask people that are in your life. Go ask them, like, do I ever just kind of like take off on some topic and talk about it for a long time without giving anybody a chance to say anything or without being invited to do that? Ask them. They'll tell you. And if they tell you, yeah, you kind of do that sometimes, awesome. Now you know, and just stop. It's that simple. And the people who do that are also the kind of people who have no trouble at all adopting a way of evaluating the conversation in real time so that they don't make some of these big mistakes. All right, so not a whole lot to work on here. Just think about the talk rally, back and forth, back and forth. Try to keep it going for as long as you can. If you notice the signals that are not, the body language signals saying that it's not really going that well, bow out gracefully, move on, talk to somebody else. Just try it. Have a good holiday. Talk to you soon.